Are you scared of talking to strangers because you think that might turn you into a pickup artist? If that's the case, we have a problem. I'm fairly sure that you watching this video are not a pickup artist, but you need that same certainty as well. Otherwise, you will always have that doubt in your mind while you speak to people. And that nagging doubt in the back of your head will obviously ruin your interactions. So in this presentation, we take the time to really dig deep and look at what actually makes up a pickup artist. What is the difference between healthy offline dating where you approach people in a respectful way and what is known as pickup artistry? And it turns out it's not super easy to figure out where the line is here. And that's the reason most people are stuck, because they're intellectually lazy and they don't want to even think about it in the nitty-gritty detail. But in this presentation here, I want to make sure that we really separate it nicely so that you can go out into the real world, talk to strangers, approach attractive people, and never have that feeling again that you are doing something like pickup art. I want to start with a short story. I was interviewed recently by a reporter of a big German newspaper, and they came to me asking me about what I do, and I told them I help people get better at talking to strangers in the real world. And they were like, yeah, that's amazing. It's so sad that this doesn't happen a lot. And I said, yeah, it's kind of hard for a lot of guys because there are a lot of different psychological barriers to that. And they were really excited about the whole idea. But then at some point, the reporter asked me, but you're not a pickup artist or something like that, right? And I said, well, if you ask me that way, definitely no. But what do you mean exactly? What is a pickup artist for you? And she said, well, these guys that come and just talk to me in the streets and in the public spaces of my city. I said, well, yeah, that's kind of what I was describing earlier. But she said, no, but they do it in this weird way. And she wasn't really able to articulate what they do exactly. And that's a state that most of the population is in. They can't articulate exactly what makes talking to a stranger creepy and what way you can do that without ever being creepy. And so here in this presentation, I really want to draw the line. Make sure you watch till the end so that you understand that and you never have that doubt in your mind again. First of all, we have to acknowledge that partner search is a very tricky topic for everyone really, but especially for men. One thing is that for many different men, this topic of dating and partner search will look very, very different depending on your background, your culture, your physical attributes, your attitudes. Basically, the world of dating can look extremely different from different perspectives. And also there's this belief that you shouldn't even have to worry about dating. It should just happen naturally. You shouldn't have to do any attentive, conscious work in that area, especially if you're a high-value, attractive man. Why would you have to worry about it? If you are worrying about it, it means that you're kind of not desirable. And so those kind of beliefs are often flying around in the psychological landscape around dating, and that's why a lot of people don't even want to really engage with that topic and don't really want to think consciously about partner search. For men, this whole topic is particularly loaded because in our biological past, it was actually the case that not all men would be able to find a partner and procreate. There was a tendency in our ancestral history where women would mostly procreate, whereas from the men, only few of the men would actually procreate and have children with many multiple female partners. I'm not saying this is the way it is right now or it has to be. It's just the way it was in our biological past. And you can even prove this looking at DNA. You can prove that 67% of our ancestors were female and only 33% were male. A lot of our ancestors were male who didn't procreate, and so they basically exited our ancestral line and they're not really our ancestors anymore. So for men, deep down, rooted in our biology, there is a quite justified fear of just going empty-handed, because women tend to choose the highest attractivity, the highest value males in the society. And so with that kind of backdrop, it's understandable that dating is a topic that's loaded and difficult for men to navigate, especially if it's not working naturally and it just doesn't happen on its own. Let's look at it from a first principles perspective. What are your options ultimately as a man in the world of dating and finding a partner? You're born and you grow up, and for some people, love just happens. You just meet someone in school, in career, in your friend circle, and you never even have to think about dating. You never even have to think about partner search. It just happens. But then there are people, and I was one of those, for whom it just doesn't happen. And they go through their lives hearing this myth that love should just happen. Often that's a myth that's propagated by the people who are on this end of the spectrum. But you keep doing what you're doing and you don't find the right partner. What you do then oftentimes is that you start working on yourself. You learn about personal development, you go to the gym, you build a career, you maybe even build a social circle. And oftentimes then it does actually just happen and you find someone naturally without having to really expand a lot of effort. But then again, there are people who do that and still for some reason or another, they don't just naturally, organically find someone. They don't just run into their dream partner who then ends up liking them and they end up making a relationship. So at that point you can say, okay, I'm going to work even harder on myself. I'm going to really excel and become the best at what I'm doing and build an amazing community. And oftentimes that's when it happens. But again, there are some people for whom it just doesn't happen. And this doesn't have to mean that you're not adapted to the world or insufficient in any way. It just means that you're unique in some certain way. And for me, that was because of my cultural background. Also because of some other psychological hindrances that I had in my upbringing. And so it's very common for people to end up here in this side of the spectrum. And at that point, you have certain options. The most common one is, let's try the dating apps. That's what dating apps are there for. That's how they make money. And sometimes it works, but oftentimes they still don't work. And then there's just 3 other options left. The worst one here is to just resign and say love, romance, marriage, family, that's just not for me. And unfortunately, a lot of people end up here in this corner. I see a lot of those people every day. It's more than you think. Another option is to say, well, I'm not getting intimacy in the regular, the socially supported and acceptable ways. I'm going to go to the more underground societies, sex-positive parties, tantra retreats, or I'm just gonna exit the dating culture of the West and get an arranged marriage. Also an option. But then of course there's this other option that is quite tempting, which is to just learn how to attract people proactively in the real world. Because everyone who lives in a city sees attractive potential partners every moment of walking around. And so oftentimes the thought will arise in people's head, how amazing would it be to just be able to interact with those people and attract the right ones into your life and then find the right person that way, the old school way. But of course, the big label, the big danger, the big critique that you're going to get for doing something like this or even thinking about something like this is, that's what pickup artists do. Bad. This whole area down here is an area of darkness because as we discussed earlier, this problem of partner search for men, especially if the natural, the organic way doesn't work, is an area that's infested with insecurities, with suppression and psychological blind spots because it's connected to this deep, hardwired biological drive to procreate. And so here the unconscious is playing a big role. And in this area of darkness, a lot of morbid ideas and behaviors tend to thrive. So the concept of the pickup artists fits very well into that little corner down there. And it's also a strong interest of this online dating industry here to make it seem like their main competitor, which is talking to people offline, is immediately toxic, bad, pickup artist, dark, don't go there. So what I'm doing here in this video is really, I'm opposing a very strong business interest. The biggest companies of our century are online communication companies, and their interest is to make offline communication seem slightly weird. And so that should also explain why there is a strong judgment in the intellectual public sphere against talking to people offline, because it opposes the interest of the strongest, most powerful players in the world economy right now. But as we'll come to see, you can learn how to attract people offline in the real world and start interactions with strangers without being a pickup artist. There is an overlap of those two things. It's very obvious. The one thing that those two sorts of behaviors have in common is you approach actual strangers in real life. Now, that is already a crazy thing for most people to even imagine. So when they see someone do that, they immediately associate it with a lot of other stuff here that they have seen in the media associated with that kind of behavior. But what we're doing here in this video is we're saying, well, wait a second. Just because I'm doing that one behavior that another group of people who are portrayed on media doesn't mean that I do all the other stuff that they do. There is obviously a way to talk to strangers in real life that has nothing to do with pickup artistry, except that you also go up to strangers in the real world. And so that's what we want to now separate out here. And for that, I created this spectrum, because what we'll see is that there is no way to draw the line in a very distinct, clear way where you say this is exactly what you have to do to turn into a pickup artist. There is more of a transition. Like with everything significant in life, this stuff exists on a continuum. But let's start with the obvious things that pickup artists would do and we associate with pickup artists, and where it's clear that the media and the mainstream public perception would call someone a pickup artist. First thing that pickup artists tend to do that healthy offline dating shouldn't include is crude and objectifying language. You all know what I mean. There are these words that you can use to describe partners, potential partners, and people in general, which are just very demeaning. And why would you use those words? That's one way that you can easily separate yourself from pickup artists. Look up pickup artists, just see how they speak online, and say, well, there's something wrong with the tone of voice, with the vocabulary, and I'm just going to use the sophisticated, more respectful terms. Oftentimes, they almost mean the same thing, but just by using more sophisticated language, you can easily separate yourself from that crowd. Another way that pickup artistry differs from healthy offline dating is that in offline dating, the goal is to find love and to actually end up in a relationship. Whereas in pickup artist teachings, oftentimes the goal is to just have a lot of sexual conquests, a lot of novelty, and keep going. Pickup artists, self-proclaimed or externally proclaimed, often tend to just be single or polygamous or never really committed, and they keep dating into old age. Whereas the healthy offline dating that I would propagate is involving an element of sexual novelty, because during the time of dating, you will meet new people frequently, but the eventual goal is to kind of transition out of that and commit to one person and actually build a long-term relationship. That's one easy way, again, to separate yourself from pickup artists. Another focus that pickup artistry would set is seduction. It's about learning the skills that you need to seduce someone and to get someone into bed with you. Whereas on the healthy offline dating side, we focus more on building general social skills. community, building a system for holistic personal growth that doesn't just help you with seducing women, but also helps you in leading groups, holding speeches, organizing fun events, having friends, networking at work. We recognize that seduction is an area that we need to study, but we cannot separate it out from general social skills. Pickup artists often use communication as an instrument. It's more like a thing that has instrumental value because it can get you certain pleasures. And in offline dating, the way I teach it, communication is an end in itself, even independent of the results, because you learn to actually enjoy the process of turning the inside, whatever is in your head, out and sharing that with the world. Then on the pickup artist side, what often happens is that people use a mechanical understanding of the world and try to see the world as a deterministic, almost a scientific experiment that you can put certain inputs into and then calculate the effect and make sure that the effect is actually to your advantage. Now, this is actually something that I wouldn't deny completely. I think that's an important aspect of socializing, to decipher the logic behind it and decipher the science and psychology in it and understand and study it. But on the offline dating side, the focus is more on an intuitive understanding and practice. Instead of studying it like a textbook, we need to go out and experience it, because the world, especially the social world, is way too complex to study it and to understand it logically. It's something that has way too many variables, so the better approach, the offline dating approach, is to just go and experience it and get an intuitive understanding that is deeper than what you can understand with your mental faculties alone. It kind of gets absorbed and gets embodied. Lastly, pickup artistry often blurs boundaries. There's often disrespect for ethical human norms. There's often a tendency to also not really have high boundaries for what kind of people you would attract, because as we saw earlier, the focus is on hedonic pleasure, and that's something you can have with all kinds of people. Whereas on the offline dating site, the goal is to find someone for a relationship, and so the boundary is much higher. The very last point that I want to mention here is that word we all love, manipulation. We associate pickup artists with manipulative techniques to distort reality, and especially to distort the value of the person who's using this technique. Whereas on the offline dating side, we focus on building real value rather than showing it off. Rather than expanding and exaggerating it, we focus on actually building it. And this takes more time, this is more difficult. Now, I made this very simple dichotomy here with left, bad pickup, right, good, white knight, offline dating. But it's not that simple. As you see here already, there is a point to be made for not being completely on the right side of the spectrum. You want to have a certain understanding of the world and a certain logic that you can refer to when you try to predict certain outcomes. You do also want to be aware that seduction is a part of communication. You also want to know that hedonic pleasure is something that your body wants, and sexual novelty as well. So instead of pushing all of that away and say all of that is bad, you want to be more nuanced than that. And you want to say the extreme of that is bad. Being here on the very edge, in the very extreme on all these different dimensions, that's the bad kind of pickup. But it's also not exactly healthy to be completely on the right side here and just speak completely the truth and only in respectful language and never use any curse words and always say, I only want love, I only want marriage, I only want kids. That also isn't very genuine. It is a part of our nature and it's a part of the human condition to have certain animalistic tendencies that want novelty, that want to seduce, that want hedonic pleasure. And there's also, of course, a part of us that just wants to make perfect sense of the world, especially for men. And so you really want to be somewhere on the right side, but not exactly on the far right. Hedonic and animalistic tendencies inside of us should be acknowledged, should be integrated, rather than suppressed. And human communication will always have an element of artifice and show. You cannot always be 100% factually honest about what's going on when you're on a date or when you're talking to new people. You know, when you meet someone on a date and you want to go somewhere else after that, maybe you want to go home with her, but you don't necessarily say, let's go home and have intercourse. That's not something people say. And that's accepted. It's totally fine to say, let's go somewhere else. Let's check out my place. I have something that I would love to show you. That's just part of human communication protocols. And so, you know, being on the far extreme right is actually not the ideal state. Everyone has a little bit of the pickup artist stuff inside of them. And that's an important realization to make. It's something that's uncomfortable. Most people will never have the openness and intellectual honesty to acknowledge that and admit this. But it's important to admit that deep inside there is an animalistic core that just really wants hedonic pleasure and just really wants to procreate as much as possible. Of course, that's not what we should follow, but we have to be aware of that. One way to illustrate this nuanced picture of how to not be a pickup artist is looking at the animal kingdom, looking at this bird, for example, the bird of paradise. He performs a very elaborate dance to attract a female partner. Now, this dance here is certainly a little bit manipulative. I mean, he looks much bigger than usually while he does this dance. He somehow has these glowing eyes and he's dancing around and showing his prowess. But still, I wouldn't say he's a pickup artist. He's doing it to seduce. So seduction is part of his motive here. But his final motive also is to actually find a relationship, find a partner to procreate with, to form a family with. He is certainly doing something to show off, but that act of showing off is embedded in a cultural ritual that's totally accepted. And the fact that males have to impress females in human society, again, is something that's totally normal and accepted. He's certainly showing off, but he's showing off what he actually has. He doesn't have some kind of artificial light effect planted behind him. He's actually showing his body in the most advantageous way, and the female here knows that this is a performance. It knows that this is an artificial, slight exaggeration of what this bird usually is like, but that's totally fine because the female bird here can recognize that and draw her own conclusions about the real value of that bird. What also seems to be clear for this guy is that he would totally respect the female not wanting to mate, and he would not run after her and lock her in. He's also not doing this for everyone. He's doing it for those birds that he actually likes. In that case, this bird is clearly not a pickup artist. So, transferring this to the human side, what it would look like to be a pickup artist in the human dating market would be to actually not have a lot of value to offer, like basically not have an interesting life, not have interesting plumage and beautiful values to provide like this bird, but still make it seem like you do. So basically doing outreach and doing a lot of marketing for yourself and making yourself look amazing, even though you're actually kind of mediocre and don't even have a lot of boundaries because you're just like telling everyone to hop into bed with you. Now this won't work long term anyways, because humans, just like those female birds, are very good at detecting this kind of bullshit. And so you will not have success with this strategy in the long term. Pickup artists, in fact, rarely have long-term success because their approach depends on this kind of deception, and deception usually doesn't work for a long time. The healthy offline dating approach, as I said earlier, focuses on creating real value, creating an amazing personality, an amazing lifestyle. And then you don't have to do huge performances, huge outrageous dances where you show how amazing you are. You just send out small signals to those few people that match your value, and they will understand that you have a lot of value to offer because it's just clear from the way you behave and carry yourself. So that said, I would say that even the whole concept of pickup artists is to a big extent a construct of our collective projection. I would go as far as to say that the pickup artist approach doesn't really exist. That far extreme of someone who's really on the left edge of our continuum that I showed earlier is not sustainable, because that would be pure deception. That would be a bird who's dancing with 2-meter high feathers that he can't even carry with his weak body. That is an approach that clearly doesn't work, but when we don't think through the stuff that we just discussed here in this video, it seems appealing. It seems like, wow, that's an easy way to have more sex, to not have to work much for it because you don't have to actually increase your value. You just kind of plug in these artificial extension feathers. It's a simple secret hack, as it's often labeled. You don't have to do any hard work, and suddenly your dance just looks so much better and you'll attract so many more birds. That idea is appealing to an unconscious part of us. It's appealing to the part of us that is animalistic, that is, first of all, lazy, that really doesn't want to do work, that doesn't care about ethical boundaries, and that is also just really interested in hedonic pleasures and procreation with as many partners as possible. That part of us wants that kind of product. And so I would say that pickup artistry is a product that was designed to appeal to that part of the human psyche. And it works, quote unquote, marketing wise, because that is a strong force in our system. And most people aren't really even aware of it because they suppress that part of themselves. They haven't integrated this animalistic side. They haven't really thought about the fact that part of us does want to be a pickup artist and is a pickup artist. And so when there's this kind of dark, suppressed force that wants something, but consciously we're pushing it down, and then somewhere on the internet, someone presents that shining object that this part really wants, that's how you get clicks. And of course, on the internet, most people are in that semi-conscious state, just doom scrolling. And so that is a marketing technique that works very well because it resonates with the state of mind that people are in. And so on the one hand, you have these people who unconsciously really want that and they pay for it, and thereby they basically create and support the concept of a pickup artist because it sells. And then on the other hand, you have other people who criticize it and who heavily judge it and who say, this is really bad, this is terrible, someone is selling these fake feathers, stop that immediately. They also often have a certain jealousy, sometimes also certain suppressed desires, because maybe their feathers are not that big and they really resent someone who's cheating with fake feathers. They again haven't taken the time to go through a video like this and understand that fake feathers usually don't work anyways, but they judge them very hard and thereby again support the phenomenon, because even negative attention is good on the internet and creates real estate on the internet because people talk about it. And that all helps the phenomenon of the pickup artist, even though it might actually not really exist. Even though once people come through the paywall of a so-called pickup artist, they will usually discover that what was written outside on the label, on the little poster in front of the shop, is not really what's offered inside. And so with that, I want to close this presentation here today and say that you can definitely learn this approach of healthy offline dating. There's just a few of these mental dead ends to avoid, a few of these mental labyrinths to navigate, and then you can be the bird who does the dance in a very culturally appropriate way where it's totally accepted and even celebrated because it's just beautiful. And you can be someone who speaks to people offline without ever having the doubt of being a pickup artist. If you want to know more about this whole topic area, make sure to like this video and subscribe to my channel. I'll see you in the next video. Good luck.